Welcome to Bollywood to Hollywood. Today we have the world premiere of 14 Red Huts, written by Andrei Platonov, or Platonov. It comes from the plateau, I guess. This is a world premiere in Manhattan at the Medicine Show Theater. I have two guests who are here to talk about the play. It's very important because it coincides with the 100 years of Russian Revolution. And here is the flyer for the play. Andrei Platonov is one of the legends and very famous. Here is actor David Ilaya. He played grandpa in that piece. Hey, David, you are an artist, right? You're an actor.
Yes.
So you play a leading role in this.
Yes, it is. Well, actually, I share it with a young girl who's playing Futilla. It's it's hard to say who's the leading person, but it is a big part. Yes.
Okay. So I wish she was here. But
I'm in all the four.
And
four
we
acts.
have also Chris Brand.
How do you
He's
do,
the actor manager at the Medicine Show Theater, and he's here to enlighten us with his research and his preparation for the play. So I'm going to start with Chris. How come you settled on this play?
Well, it was a process. It so happens, fortunately, that the wife of a company member is the editor-in-chief of the Columbia University Press. And Columbia University Press is now publishing a series of Russian books called Russia Reads. And so she showed it to her husband, who brought it to us. Several of us read the play and liked it, and through our kind of collective decision-making process, we decided to do this play and another Russian play for our season this year, since it is the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution.
Well, Mr. Platonov, did I say it right?
Platonov.
Platonov. Forgive my Russian. Platonov. Platonov, he wasn't famous at that time he was alive, right?
He was in Russia, apparently. He was very well known in Russia, in fact, as a very good writer. This play was not produced in Russia, as far as I know, until 1989, because it is rather critical of Stalin's policy of forced collectivization in the steppes of Russia and Ukraine, a policy which was followed through to its logical conclusion, which meant that a great many peasants starved to death in the period between 1930 and 1933. One of the things that I did this summer was to do a lot of reading, and I know David also read this book, a book by Robert Conquest called Harvest of Sorrow, which exhaustively details with a great deal of documentation the 3 years from 1930 to 1933. And one of the things that I found out from this, which I had no idea of before, was the death toll during those 3 years was close to 15 million people.
15 million, that's like a Holocaust.
That is a couple of Holocausts, yeah.
So
and
this book, this play, it's not an indictment on communism or Marxism? Or
no, if anything, it's an indictment of the human tendency to think in terms of ideological purity rather than taking a look at what's really in front of their faces.
It looks like they have not revealed this one to the outside world.
This play?
Yeah, this non 15 million deaths.
Oh, the 15.
It's not known as much.
It's known now. It
but
has
not
been,
at the time.
but at the time, no.
Platonov.
Yeah.
Platonov, he was courageous to write this one.
Extremely. Yeah.
I remember when I was in Madras, my professor told me, how do you define an intellectual? I think it is courage to speak out. That's what he told me.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember that. So Platonov is an intellectual in that sense. And even though he brought it out, it was not allowed to be produced because of the Soviet.
Well, the interesting thing to me
Yes, David.
is that he actually could see what was happening. And he had the verbal skill as a writer, had great verbal skills, great literary skills, and he could actually present it and show it for what it was. I mean, there was a great effort on the part of the Soviet Union to deny everything that was going on. It was not happening. There were some very famous news writers, columnists who came from the States, who went to Russia. Everything is wonderful. How can they be saying
Isn't that
all
what
of these things?
Bernard Shaw said?
Bernard Shaw, but if you really look at the reality, Bernard Shaw was never taken to some of those, neighborhoods or some of those kolkhozes, or some of those areas where you could really see what was going on. He was taken on a tour, of only the best, only the finest. So there was a great need to suppress that, because at the time, I mean, the Soviet Union needed to be recognized. They wanted to become part of part of all the great states of the world. So they had to play down that, that they were acting and that's what was going on.
Well, if there is an indictment of this nature, it would be on Stalinism, but not on wholesale socialist revolutions everywhere. Is it, or is it not?
There are those who argue that that socialist revolution inevitably ends up in this kind of thing. I don't agree with that, but it's a much more complex situation than can be laid then the blame can be laid at any one person's feet. Stalin himself was instrumental in this, but he was by no means the only one who was carrying out these policies. And I think that it is because they tried it in the early 1920s as well, and it didn't work then, so Lenin walked it back. But it was pretty bad then, too. There were 5 million starvation deaths in the early 1920s in the same area, and primarily in Ukraine.
That leads me to another question. Why are we bringing this now in America?
2 reasons. One, it's never been done here before. This is the English language premiere of the play. 2, it's an extremely good play. It's a very, very difficult play, but it's a wonderful piece of playwriting. And 3, it's the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, and we did not want to do the standard things that one would do.
Is the election of Trump which anything to do with it? So,
our choice to do this play really had nothing to do with Trump, other than the fact that everything has to do with Trump these days. But it is obviously extremely relevant to what's going on in this country now, because one of the things that enabled this policy and this the forced collectivization and the mass starvation of the people was the use of slogans. There's a scholar of Platonov who was at the theater last night and spoke about this, and showed how the use of slogans dehumanized people. And it is somewhat similar to the way Trump uses slogans such as Crooked Hillary and so on. And it's somewhat similar also to our use of advertising
Well, like what
slogans.
Kelly did when he called the war an empty barrel. I mean, it's just, you know, people just hitch into that, and it resonates and supplies meaning to them when it has no real meaning or value at all.
So it's the life of the Russians suffering in 1922, 30s.
1930, yeah.
The famine
Mhm.
and death of children, men, women, everyone.
There were fields in Ukraine and Dagestan and the steppes of Russia where you couldn't walk across the field without stepping on corpses. That's how bad it was. This is from Robert Conquest's book, Harvest of Sorrow, which is an extremely well documented book.
So David, let me ask you this, since you played the role, a major role, leading role, or one of the leading roles. So as an actor, what's your take on this play?
Well, when I first read it, I don't know, I can't really say that I liked it, because to a great extent, I didn't understand it. I would read words, I would, a paragraph, and let's say in one paragraph you might have 4 sentences, and each sentence was so totally different from the previous sentence that I didn't know how on earth they were connected. So as an actor, I didn't know how on earth am I going to work on this? How am I going to take this play and so digest it or ingest it that it really becomes, I don't know, like my own kind of personal experience. So I did a lot of background reading, like I read the Robert Conquest books on the Harvest of Sorrow, a lot of what was going on at the time. But I have to say now, because it's extremely interesting, having played it, we've had, 10 performances, 11 years?
Yeah.
Having played it, having played the part, having been there, I began to have very, very personal understandings and connections. And what might in one way seem extremely foreign is not foreign to me at all. I can find, I can find things in my life, in my personal life, that opens up the play that I can, bring to my interpretation.
So you're using your
characters.
sense memory.
Well, no, I wouldn't say sense memory, but certainly, certainly memories and feelings that I have. I mean, like, one of the basic conclusions and understandings that I've really come for myself, maybe giving away a little actor's secret, is the real love I feel this character has for all the people. Now, when I first read the play, I didn't see that at all, and everybody was talking about it, and they were making descriptions of the kind of person he was, and I asked several people, what kind of person do you think he is? And they were all giving me this advice, their input. But it's only after having done this process of work to begin to see, I have my own understanding of him, which is extremely personal, and I like it a lot.
But he is foreign to the context of this little 14 red
Right.
book.
You mean the character is foreign?
He's not a Russian, is he?
No.
So he came up from outside.
Yes.
Isn't it strange to bring, in Chekhov, you don't see that. In Gorky, you don't see that. But in this play, somebody coming from outside and watching what is happening.
Oh, but it's a reflection of the reality of the 1930s and 20s and 30s in Russia, because not only Shaw, but Malcolm Muggeridge, a number of other British intellectuals and some Americans, and Victor
Muggeridge
Serge.
really saw it.
Muggeridge really saw it, yeah, and refused to report on it.
Why did you think, any of you, why did you think Platonov introduced this character into the play?
Because that's what was happening in Russia.
But he could have written it without this character.
He could have, but the character of Boss that David plays
Grandpa,
allows us to see the reality of the collectivization process through the eyes of somebody who is closer to us and less compromised by the sloganeering of the socialist revolution than the Russian characters in the play.
See, Boss is in a position, I mean, as the character, he's in a position to actually see what's going on with the people, what they're actually doing. I mean, like, for instance, there's this wonderful character in the play, Anton, who is nothing but slogans, and he's totally consumed by them. And when it starts to break down, you know, the strength, you know, when the inner, you know, validity starts to break down, you see he gets quite disturbed. And it's a marvelous opportunity for a character like Boss to see that and to reflect and to see what's actually happening to the people. And Boss puts the character Anton in a position where he could reflect, and it throws him. It throws him off.
But this, your character,
Yes.
he drinks only milk and then the chemicals.
Well, that is a commentary on the times, because one of the beliefs, and we even had it in this country at a certain time ago, where if you just ate the pill, you wouldn't have to have a meal. You know, you could just live on pills and substances. I mean, it wasn't too long ago.
Is this like the drugs now?
Like the
Are the
drugs
opiates
now?
or?
Well,
It's never made explicit in the
it's
play.
never made explicit, but I, as an actor, use it, you know, it becomes part of my interpretation and my feeling about the character, that the milk and the chemical powders, I use it in a particular way as an actor for the character, but there's no question that they really believed, you know, they really believed that they were going, you know, that they could produce, you know, people could live chemically. You know, they would solve, I mean, that was part of the teaching, part of the ideology, that the whole chemical industry could nourish you, could satisfy you. And we believe that here too. There was a time,
One of the mistakes that the socialist revolution or the Russian Revolution made is exactly the same mistake that the corporate capitalist culture of this country has made, which is to believe that science can solve everything. And this was shown in particular in agriculture, because both societies, both cultures believed that large-scale industrial agriculture would solve the problem of hunger. It doesn't work no matter what your political system is. But this was a belief that was kind of universal, particularly in the early 20th century, that science was benevolent and science would solve all our problems.
Well, when you have masses of people to feed, you have to, because it was done in India too.
You need
Well,
more.
what was happening there?
Because you have to grow more to feed more mouths.
Well, the farmers were feeding the city, you know, because the city people were doing all their industrial work. So somebody had to feed them. The farmers were feeding them, and what led to the famine was all of this forced, you know, taking all the food and all the grains and everything that the farmers were producing, giving it to the cities, and forget the farmer. Let the farmer just drop by the wayside.
That's the tragedy.
I mean, that's the tragedy.
That's the
that happened.
tragedy.
Well, we have a clip.
Antoshka! Antoshka, are you there?
I'm always where it is essential for me to be according to the requirements from above or according to my own personal point of view as to what will be most important to the state.
I can see a crack. How bright the sun shines on the coals. How much longer will I be in darkness?
For an nth quantity of time.
How long is an in?
Nobody knows. It's mathematics. There's an nth quantity of water in the sea. There's an nth quantity of sand in the desert. Everywhere, just one gigantic in.
It's cold in here. It's all shadow.
far as temperature is concerned, it is being emitted an adequate amount of temperature. You are slandering the entire climate of the USSR.
We just saw a clip, it's in the middle of the play, where Flotilla, she had this, she was in prison, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit about that?
There's one of the kolkhoz members of the collective is ambivalent about socialism and the collectivity and so forth, and aids and abets the anti-kolkhozniks who come and steal their wealth. She discovers this and she kills him. She is then put in prison for having exceeded her authority by killing the kulak. They called them the anti-collective people. They were called kulaks, and so she's in prison, being guarded by Anton, who is the man that David referred to, who's nothing but slogans, and they have a discussion about the fact that somebody who's against socialism, according to the Bolshevik Constitution, lives outside society, and anybody in the society has the right to kill them. So she is arguing that she should not be in prison. She eventually gets released from prison by orders of the district council, and so the class enemy, Philip Vershkov, who's the one who colluded with the thieves who stole all the wealth from this. Their wealth consisted in a flock of sheep, basically, and their children. And these bantiks, bourgeois anti-kolkhozniks, stole their sheep and 2 of their children. And
so there is a lot going on.
A lot.
Besides,
going on.
besides
A lot.
death and starvation.
a lot goes on, yes.
So just
Yeah,
like
because I
human-
mean, one of the things that certainly comes up for me, I think, certainly like with the character of Veshkov, like why is somebody, in this, why does somebody want to undermine these people? Why does somebody want to see it not work? Why do they want to see it, collapse? Because he does things which, obviously against the functioning of it.
So there's no word from the central.
You never hear from them, no.
So there was no hint in the play about the Stalin government doing anything. for
Which
these
didn't
people.
happen really until later. One of the characteristics that distinguishes this time was that many of the people who were themselves the victims of Stalin's policies believed fervently in Stalin.
But actually, writer Platonov,
Yeah.
Platonov was sent to see what's really happening, right? And he was supposed
Many
to report
writers
back.
were. Platonov was sent. So was Pasternak.
Yeah.
In Platonov's case, he wrote several plays and a couple of novels, all of which detailed this period.
But he never reported to Stalin about this. He would have been killed. Sent to
Well, it's
Siberia.
hard to, it's hard, to think, that in some way they didn't know what was going, what this writer was doing, but but the writer himself, I don't think ever forced himself out into such a public way where the government think, well, we have to shut him down because he's making too much noise. But they must have known what was going on here. with
Olga
him.
Mirsin last night told us that Stalin was perfectly aware of what
So
Platonov
these people
was
were
writing.
sent to, as a wash-up just to give a good report, and so.
Well, that's one of the things that happens in the first act of the play, because these writers come to meet me. I've come
Yeah, in the beginning.
on a visit, and these writers are very interested and excited in meeting me, and it's quite obvious that they're all there, to promote their own cause. And as far as they're concerned, because one of the writers approaches the young girl and she says, well, are you having any problems and that we could write about? It's all literary. They only see it from a literary.
But you took a detour, went to the 14.
I take the
Little Red
detour
Hats.
because I want to know
Which Bernard
really.
Shaw did not
I
do.
really want to know the life of it.
Yeah.
But you see, as a character, and as I've worked on the character, my understanding is that that's what he wants. Apparently, in the play, I've lived 100 years, so I've seen a lot go down. And as I've understood the character, he really wants to see the life of the people and be with the people. But he
why-
knows that it's going to crumble. He knows it's going to end. He
But
knows
why
it's not
didn't you
gonna last.
leave? Did you become a revolutionary with them?
I
or-
left because
Oh, you did
conditions-
leave.
Yeah, conditions brought it about. One, I killed my former mistress.
Why did you kill her?
Well, because she had taken a turn in her thinking, and so she believed that that she was going to enter this society, and she was going to look at it from that distance. She wasn't going to really participate. It was going to become very glamorous. She was going to be a writer about it. She was
So
going to be
she's not going to
installed
tell the
about
truth.
it. Not at all. But she was totally convinced that they would accept her. Because one of the lines that I say to her is, yes, saying, you can't do that. They're going to throw you out. They're Bolsheviks here. You can't carry on like this. And so I realized how dangerous she can be.
She was one of those Europeans who came, saw what was happening in the revolution, and romanticized it, praised it to the skies, and so forth, and became a Marxist in name, not in reality, but in name. And that, David's character says that's the most dangerous thing. It's a very interesting take of Platonov's, his language and the way he shows these events is remarkable linguistic and literary feat. It's a very, very good play.
Well, does he have any influence of his predecessors, like Chekhov or other
Chekhov was
writers?
before him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
In a way, Platonov is the reverse of Chekhov.
Okay.
In a way. But that would be far too long a discussion, but
Well, we don't have much time, but there is this final scene, right, where all the dead children.
yeah.
I sorted out the rope. Futilla, give me the bait now.
I don't have any bait here.
So what's your take on this depth and are there any final words?
Come see the show.
Well, my final word, about the kind of life is that the life just goes on. People live their lives out of what they believe, out of what they think is necessary for them, and the life goes on. And Boss, the character that I play, is a witness to that. He sees that. And his condemnation, if you want to think of it in terms of condemnation, is he can't get out of it. He will always see that. He will never get so completely absorbed by it that he truly becomes that. He sees what it is, and he keeps moving on. And in terms of the play, he tries to make them aware of that. He says things to these people, but they're not going to wake up.
Boss is a witness to these events. So what we need is lots of people, everybody who's watching this Bollywood to Hollywood, to come and be, a witness
to our
show.
Oh, good.
www.medicineshowtheater.org. The theater is spelled with an R-E at the end. Come and see our show. We do have this week and for the rest of the run, we have a series of speakers and various experts on Russian literature, Russian history, and so forth. Tonight, there's Dr. Olga Mirsin, who's the foremost Platonov scholar in the world, I think. She's from Georgetown University. She'll be there tonight. On November 8th, Edwin Frank, the editor of the New York Review of Books, Classics. On November 10th, Dr. Kevin Platt of the University of Pennsylvania. On November 15th, Dr. Bradley Gorski of Barnard and Columbia Universities. On November 16th, Steve Bloom and several other poets. Steve has just written a new epic poem about the Russian Revolution. And on November 17th, Dr. Yakov Klotz of Hunter College. And these people will be coming and doing talkbacks and Q&As after the show on those nights.
So we have shows Thursday to
Wednesday, Thursday,
Wednesday,
Friday,
Thursday.
Saturday at 7:30 and Sunday at 5.
5.
And
Okay.
it closes on the 19th?
On the 18th,
18th.
on the 18th of
18th
November, it closes.
So everyone will be encouraged to go and see the show and also listen to what these experts got to say. There are human tragedies. We have Holocaust, and this is one of those Holocausts that has never been reported at that point of time. And I think human race has to learn from their own mistakes. Whatever
hope
may be
so.
their ism. It's capitalism, socialism, communism, any ism you talk about it. So maybe this may be.
Well, it's interesting because one of the Anton, who speaks in slogans, does say the importance of mistakes.
Yeah.
He makes a very pointedly. This is what we learn
So
from
the
them.
human race and
Hopefully.
has to learn these mistakes. The only way you learn is come watch the show at the Medicine Show Theater, because no one else is showing it, and this is the world premiere of this play.
English language.
And he is one of the greatest scholars of the Soviet Union, or the 5 or 6 greatest genius writers of this century, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. So you have all the information. We don't have much time. I wish we can talk more, but.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very
thanks
much,
for coming
Ravi.
onto the show,
Thank you.
David.
Thank you.
Chris. And we'll be back with another show. So thank you for watching it, and please go watch the Medicine Show Theater's 14 Red Hearts. Thank you. Goodbye.